Brian Claypool is a veteran criminal defense attorney, and he joins us now. He's been following this case. Brian, your reaction to what occurred inside this courtroom?
Hey, Greg, nice to see you again. I'm a little bit surprised with the verdict. I thought that, Hunter Biden had a hometown courtroom. It's in his backyard. His family has a legacy in Delaware for going back 40, 50 years. He's got his mom, the first lady, in the first row of the courtroom. You've got his daughter up on the stand being cross-examined, and she's choked up. Hunter's in tears. And it was a warm, friendly courtroom. So I'm a bit surprised by the verdict. I thought that Hunter Biden's lawyer made the best argument he could, which I thought was a potentially viable argument, which is at the time that Hunter Biden is signing the form to purchase the gun, he didn't believe that he was, addicted to an illegal drug. And quite frankly, Greg, I'm not sure the prosecution was able to hone in on that timeline and actually present somebody, for example, somebody to say, hey, I saw Hunter Biden on the day he purchased this gun and he looked disoriented. He was stumbling. Yeah. He looked like he, was under the influence. That was missing. So this is a powerful and profound verdict. And Greg, it's kind of interesting, right? Because in many respects, the verdict in former President Trump's case and the verdict in this case were decided on circumstantial evidence, right? Facts that were proved by inference. And that's usually uncommon in a criminal trial.
Yeah. Let me just interject, though. The advantage for the prosecution was that they didn't have to prove that Hunter Biden, the day he walked into the gun store, was high on drugs or under the influence or stumbling in some way. No, the judge said, look, under the law, all you have to do, prosecutors, is prove that during the general time frame that he was either addicted to drugs or an unlawful user of drugs. And the circumstantial evidence was very strong. There were text messages in the days before and the day after the purchase of the gun showing Hunter Biden is in contact with suspected drug dealers trying to score, presumably crack cocaine at his, local convenience store, a 7-Eleven. There were witnesses who said, he was constantly smoking crack cocaine every 20 minutes. His own words in his book said, during that time period, I was addicted to drugs. So you were really asking, if you were the defense, the jurors to suspend their common sense and say, maybe he was in denial and therefore he didn't knowingly lie on the form and knowingly break the law. That just defies common sense, doesn't it, Brian?
Yeah, but Greg, is that a proper instruction? I don't know. I mean, is it a general time? It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, the other fact, look, I don't know. Judges can do what they want. Just so everybody knows, there's what's called special jury instructions. There's usually standard jury instructions that apply in almost every jurisdiction, which are agreed on by legal scholars, retired judges. And then there's what's called special jury instructions, which are tailored by the lawyers, approved by the judge, and issued in a case. If both sides, let's back up. If both sides agreed to that, then there's no appellate issue on the judge saying it could be a general time frame. Because Greg, what is a general time frame? Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a month? Was that spelled out in the instruction? But looking beyond that, one of the big reasons I was surprised too is for the same reason I was surprised by the verdict in Trump. There shouldn't have been a guilty verdict in Donald Trump's case. Why? Because there wasn't a victim. And there really wasn't a victim in this case either. Biden owned the gun for 11 days. I think he had been in rehab.
Well, it was dropped
before.
off. It was stashed in a dumpster very close to a school, and that speaks for itself. There was a potential victim there, innocent children. I asked Saul what he thought about punishment in this case when it comes time for sentencing. What do you think?
Hey, Greg, before I answer that, I wanted to dovetail what Miranda's talking about. I think the biggest takeaway from the Hunter Biden trial is not the guilty verdict. It's the fact that the prosecution utilized a laptop that in 2020, they had 51 powerful people in this country deemed it as Russian disinformation. And now that's the cornerstone of your case years later. And think about it, Greg. Maybe that's why prosecutors a while back were trying to barter a plea deal with Hunter Biden. Why? Because they knew that they needed evidence from that laptop, and they didn't want the world to know that this laptop is now legitimate. And now look what happened. It blew up. And my position would be is that there should be some further investigation now. This shouldn't be the end of the Hunter Biden trial. This should be the start and launch of a more serious, copious investigation utilizing what's on that laptop. Saul talked about something earlier, or one of your guests talked about Burisma. Remember that WhatsApp message, Greg? There was a WhatsApp exchange between Hunter Biden and I believe it was a Chinese, a guy from a Chinese company that Hunter was doing work for. And Hunter came right out and said in the text, hey, my dad's sitting right next to me. Are you going to send the money? Remember that? Why are we not relaunching an investigation into potential extortion?
When Hunter Biden was asked about that in front of Congress, he said he made it up, that his dad wasn't actually there. The chairman who was sitting there was James Comer, and Comer has now just issued the following statement. Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea deal was smoked out after scrutiny by a federal judge. Today's verdict is a step toward accountability. But until the Department of Justice investigates everyone involved in the Biden's corrupt influence peddling schemes that generated over $18 million in foreign payments to the Biden family, it will be clear department officials continue to cover for the big guy, Joe Biden. I tend to think that statement is fairly accurate on all fronts, Brian. But let me get to the question I first posed to you.
Yeah.
What kind of punishment is Hunter Biden looking at? Is it going to be probation?
Yeah,
Will he actually receive jail time? What do you think?
I think he's going to serve a short amount of time. I don't think he's going to just get probation for this, because you made a good point. You've made me rethink this case. And by the way, I'm a victim of gun violence. So you've had me thinking about your comment 15 minutes ago when you said that that gun could have been picked up and used by somebody else to harm somebody else. So I'm a victim of the Las Vegas shooting. So I am a bona fide victim of gun violence. And I think that is going to weigh into the judge's mind, that we can't just give a slap on the wrist when for years in this country, we have been trying to find ways, Greg, to curb mass violence in this country. And like you said, you made a good point. Somebody could have gotten their hands on this and it could have been way worse than we're talking about. So for that big reason, I think there's going to be a short amount of times, but not in a jail. I think Hunter's going to be sent somewhere, a very nice place, or potentially even, carry out the sentence at home with an ankle bracelet, something to that effect. I think it's going to be a short amount of time, but I can't imagine for a serious crime involving a firearm that he's going to walk scot-free and not serve a day incarcerated.
And Brian, what about what Saul and I were just talking about? I'm with him. I'm against misusing the law, contorting statutes, mangling evidence, and twisting facts to bring a specious case, which I think is exactly what Alvin Bragg did. But I'm deeply disturbed, as I think Saul and Sean Hannity are, with the actions of these 51 ex-Intel officials who acted apparently at the behest of Tony Blinken, who was then a key operative in the Biden campaign, to phony up this letter, to misrepresent that the laptop was Russian disinformation when they knew that was a lie. And the FBI, which had months earlier verified the authenticity of the laptop, sat mum. They had the ability. Christopher Wray could have stepped forward and said, you know what? These Intel officials are not giving it to you straight, American voters. This laptop is authentic. We verified it. It's been corroborated. It's self-authenticating. The people who sent or received emails on it have verified the contents, and it came from the laptop. You know, Christopher Wray sat silent. So that makes him, in my mind, complicit with these corrupt, crooked 51 lying ex-Intel officials who unduly influenced the last presidential election. And there is some polling data that says if Americans had known the truth, the outcome would have been different. What do you think?
Greg, here's what I think. Clapping. Absolutely, 100%, categorically agree with you. In fact, I said what you just said on Liz McDonald's show last week on Fox Business. I told her point blank, we should have 51 indictments. Shouldn't we? You took a former president to a trial on a legal catch and kill scheme and tried to turn that into Trump interfering with an election. Are you kidding me? And there's a conviction on that. That pales in comparison to 51 leaders in our United States who knowingly and intentionally got together and lied to the face of every person in this country about this garbage with this laptop that has now ironically been validated as having integrity at a federal trial of Hunter Biden. There have to be consequences, Greg. There have to be. But how do we have consequences unless somebody in leadership in the DOJ takes this seriously and starts an investigation? Sean Hannity is 100% correct. This is, and like I said before, this isn't the end. Hunter Biden's verdict isn't the end. This is the beginning. There has to be a serious now investigation, not only of the laptop, but these 51 individuals. And Greg, this isn't 51 guys at a ball game, right? Getting together and signing a letter. This isn't me going to the grocery store and somebody asking me to sign, those petitions you get asked to sign for human rights and everything. These are powerful people in our country who just lied to the face of this country and arguably, like you just said, affected an election. So there has to be something done to sew up and
they're remorseless, Brian. They don't care. They're proud of what they did. Clapper,
Greg, they don't care.
James
they don't
Clapper,
care.
former DNI, was asked recently, do you regret what you did? Do you recant it? No, he said. Same thing with John Brennan, former head of the CIA. These guys have never apologized for lying to the American public and unduly influencing the election. No mea culpas whatsoever. And, their partners in crime were the mainstream media. They were Joe Biden's suck-ups and sycophants who peddled the same fiction. And they said, this laptop has been debunked. It's completely phony. It's Russian disinformation. And, of course, only after Joe Biden was safely ensconced in the White House did they come clean and say, well, yeah, it's been authenticated and we verified it. And then they moved on to their next lie. That's what the mainstream media did as well.
Yeah, Greg, it gets worse too. When I did Liz's show last week, she played a clip of the debate in 2020. The debate between Trump and Biden. And Biden is looking at President Trump and saying, "Oh, that laptop is nothing. That is not Hunter's laptop. Nothing on that is legitimate." Do you remember that? That was he says this
of course.
in a debate, and we now know
Well,
that is false. And if I'm President Trump's advisory, if I'm on his advisory team for marketing in this election, I would run a commercial, Greg. My commercial for President Trump would be that debate piece, right? With Biden say, "Oh, that laptop's nothing." Then you have the 51 folks saying this is just Russian disinformation. And then you have President Trump talking about integrity and truth in this society. That would be my commercial. Because what I find troubling as an average American is for years all I hear from the left is President Trump is a liar. He's a cheat. He's a womanizer. This guy has no integrity. Don't vote for him, right? And look at what you just talked about. 51 leaders and the president on the left who have cast the biggest lie potentially in the history of our country to affect an election. It's just despicable.
Why is it I feel like there will never be any consequences, Brian? Even if there is a change of guard at the Department of Justice, as there desperately needs to be, so much of this was well obstructed beyond the statute of limitations.
Yeah, Greg, I got to. This is a sobering time we live in. I mean, I'm just sitting here talking to you, but it's like an out of body experience for me personally that we live in a country that's supposed to be founded on truth, integrity, and let's get information to voters that's accurate, so we can make our own. We have a pristine right to vote, right? And it's contaminated, Greg. We live in a contaminated society. You being a lawyer, me being a lawyer, seeing our legal systems just decimated. We see a guy like Alvin Bragg going to the extreme he did to take on a former president on some BS charge, right? And tried to tie that to interfering with an election. And yet all of us are talking about, in my opinion, one of the most egregious things that's happened in a century that nobody but you and a couple other shows are talking about, right? How do we as human beings with a heart and soul allow leadership in this country to condone the biggest lie on the planet in 2020 without any repercussions? I think this is bigger than just interfering with the election. We're talking about the moral fiber of our society moving forward. And I would just pray that if President Trump makes it back into office, maybe Greg, we'll get a leap of faith and he'll be able to do something to get the right leadership on board and do a serious investigation into all of this. But more important, maybe President Trump can stop the legal system too from being utilized as a playground to promote political agendas on the left side. It's just, to me, it's a sad day. It really is.
Yeah. Want to go to Brian Claypool again. The Trump campaign, Brian, has issued the following statement, the Trump campaign. Quote, "The trial has been nothing more than a distraction from the real crimes of the Biden crime family, which has raked in tens of millions of dollars from China, Russia, Ukraine. Crooked Joe Biden's reign over the Biden family criminal enterprise is all coming to an end on November 5th, and never again will a Biden sell government access for personal profit." Your reaction to that statement? He's pretty much doing what Joe Biden tried to do after the Trump conviction, and that is turn a political corner, right?
Yeah, Greg, I believe so. I think that I might have handled the statement a little bit different, kind of consistent with what Sean Hannity had mentioned and what I had mentioned. I would have said something to the effect that look, this trial was actually bigger than Hunter Biden. I would have gone above that and said this was about government officials lying about a computer that has on that computer ripe, salient evidence that could be utilized in an investigation to potentially lead to indictments of, members of the Biden family. I would have handled it that way and then used it as an opportunity for President Trump to say, look, like you said a few minutes ago, Greg, where's the investigation? When are we going to now start a legitimate investigation? We have Exhibit A that should lead to a lot more indictments in this country. But look, at the end of the day, I get it. He's the former president. It's an election coming up, and he's got to talk politics.
Brian, Saul Weisenberg made the following point, that Hunter Biden and his defense team still have a viable appellate issue and Saul thinks this is, really quite legitimate. The argument that the plea deal that was ripped up was actually quite valid and enforceable, and neither this trial and ensuing conviction nor the Los Angeles tax case should be pursued or respected. And what do you think about that argument?
I think it's a solid argument, Greg, and I think there's possibly another argument as well in addition to that. And let's talk a little bit about what was allegedly agreed to in this plea agreement, that Hunter Biden would get immunity. Remember that? Like they were going to shut down, as I understood it, all investigations of Hunter Biden. That was part of the plea deal, and that's what upset the judge too. That's not even constitutional. If there's evidence leading to a crime, you've got to follow the evidence. So what I would potentially argue for Hunter Biden on appeal as well is, and I hate to say it, but it's ineffective assistance of counsel. And you have a constitutional right to, good counsel, effective counsel at trial. I mean, to have a lawyer put together an agreement like that and walk it into a federal judge, and risk your client now going to trial like this and get convicted on 3 felonies and potentially face jail time, rest assured that Hunter Biden is going to get a new set of appellate lawyers, and they are going to raise that issue of ineffective assistance of counsel as a grounds for appeal.
Yeah. You agree with that, Brian? What do you think?
I think Mark makes a great point. I really do. I mean, one of the most powerful points Mark makes is how can you look at a judge and look in the mirror? By the way, if you had a prior agreement to drop these charges, do a diversion program, and wait a minute, because of an unconstitutional provision in the plea agreement, we went to trial. Oh, by the way, we got a verdict, and now we want to send them to jail. It flies in the face of a dignity, quite honestly. So I think that's I think that's the most powerful argument, and I think the second most Mark talked about is, Hunter Biden has shown some remorse. He's trying to get his life together, and I think all 12 of these jurors had somebody in their family who's dealing with a drug issue and understands that it is a disease. So I think that's another powerful mitigating factor for no jail time.
Well, and you've put it so eloquently, Brian, and thank you for doing so. We're looking right now, Wilmington, Delaware. Momentarily, we'll carry it live. Prosecutors are going to speak about the guilty verdicts in the Hunter Biden case. I want to thank Brian Claypool.